Welcome to my channel, and enjoy watching. For 3 years, she was just Sprocket, a quiet mechanic blending into the background. But beneath the grease-stained coveralls hides one of the deadliest covert operators in the world. When a high-stakes mission goes off the radar, she transforms into a ghostly force capable of taking down fortified compounds alone, rescuing hostages, and disappearing without a trace. I've spent the last 3 years buried under the hoods of Humvees and supply trucks at Forward Operating Base Stonewatch, blending so seamlessly into the background that most soldiers barely notice me. To them, I'm just Sprocket, the oil-streak mechanic who fixes engines, changes tires, and keeps the base running. Always quiet, always working, always invisible. No one knew that under the grease-stained coveralls and the hair tied neatly into regulation style, I am, or rather, was Captain Alara Sprocket Vance, a covert operator with Raven Unit, the Army's most secretive strike team. 8 years of black ops, dozens of confirmed kills, and a body of experience that made conventional forces look like amateurs. That side of me has been sleeping for 3 years, buried beneath a fake record claiming I stepped back into vehicle maintenance due to combat fatigue. The truth? I was waiting for the call that only comes once in a lifetime. That call arrived today. My encrypted wrist comm buzzed with a message so tightly coded only a handful of people could send it. Package compromised. Execute Protocol Helios. Authorization Sigma 3. My grip on the torque wrench stayed steady, but my mind snapped into operational mode in a heartbeat. Protocol Helios was the kind of directive whispered about in the deepest corners of military intelligence, granting total freedom of action when standard rescue operations fail, when lives are on the line and the chain of command can't intervene. I was crouched beside the engine of a newly arrived armored convoy vehicle when the message hit. My heart didn't race. That part of me doesn't. I slid the wrench into the tool tray, wiped my hands, and moved toward the communications hub. Sergeant Malik Torres was hunched over a flickering monitor, headphones snug over his ears. "Malik," I said, voice casual, "I need the latest patrol logs for last night." He raised an eyebrow. "Why would the motor pool need that?" "Cross-checking vehicle strain," I replied smoothly. "Need to see which units are overusing their fleet." He shrugged and pulled up the files. My eyes skimmed the digital reports like a hawk. That's when I froze. SEAL Team Delta had rolled out at 2,230 hours for Operation Iron Watch. Expected return, 0600. Current status, no contact. 8 hours unaccounted for in hostile territory. That meant one thing, captured. Or worse. I left the hub and returned to my garage. Beneath the workbench, hidden behind boxes of spare parts and oil cans, lay my real arsenal. A sat phone with channels unlisted, tactical vests, suppressed weapons, and equipment no mechanic should ever own. Everything I might need to rip through a fortified enemy compound and bring my people home. I hadn't touched any of it in 3 years. Until now. I dialed a number that technically didn't exist. "Control. This is Vance. Status on package." A familiar, clipped voice replied. "Vance. Package compromised. 6 assets taken. Grid 38. 4412 North, 50. 6,783 East. Enemy strength, 40 plus. Conventional extraction impossible. Do you accept?" I glanced around the motor pool. Every truck, every toolbox, every idle engine, my camouflage. This is what I do. Work in plain sight while preparing for the impossible. "Affirmative," I said. "Voluntary operation. No promise of extraction. If caught, rogue status. Confirm?" "Confirmed. Vance out." I set my jaw and began the transformation. Under 3 hours, I would be a mechanic no longer. I would be the ghost that terrifies enemy forces, the precision instrument they didn't know existed. I had to move fast. Every minute mattered. The target was a fortress disguised as an abandoned mining site. 30 clicks into enemy territory, bristling with hardened fighters and layered defenses. Conventional forces would need a company and air support to even attempt a rescue. Me? Just me. My truck. My planning. My hands. I took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from my brow, and whispered to the empty garage, "Let's fix this." By 1830 hours, I was walking toward the motor pool office with a requisition slip in hand. "Sir, I need to take the repair truck out for a parts run. I told Major Connor Hayes, who barely looked up from his paperwork. Convoy transmission blew on Unit 12, I added casually. They're waiting on pieces from FOB Sentinel. How long? He asked, not really expecting an answer. Overnight, sir. Maybe longer if Sentinel's missing stock. He barely nodded. Fine. Be back for morning formation. Little did he know, he had just signed off on a covert operation that would redefine impossible. The so-called repair truck, a standard M1083 in appearance, had been my secret project for 6 months. Beneath its unassuming chassis, it had been transformed into a rolling weapons platform. Reinforced armor, advanced comms, compartments hidden from manuals, and a full suite of tactical gear. To the outside world, it was just another supply vehicle. To me, it was everything I needed to rewrite the night. Once I cleared the base checkpoint, I pulled over behind a stand of scrub pines. The grease-stained coveralls were replaced by a form-fitting tactical suit built for silent movement. My work boots were swapped for specialized combat footwear, helmet fitted with night vision and encrypted communications rig, and from hidden compartments, I pulled out my arsenal. A Remington 700 sniper rifle with suppressor and advanced optics. A Glock 19 with extended magazines. Ceramic-plated tactical vest and medical kit. Explosives with remote triggers. A small black device capable of jamming comms and scrambling surveillance. I ran through my checks methodically. Every weapon zeroed. Every device tested. Every contingency accounted for. After a lifetime of missions, this ritual had become muscle memory, and tonight, muscle memory would save lives. By 20-30 hours, I was on the move. The terrain was brutal, jagged cliffs, loose scree, and narrow ravines ready to betray a single misstep. But I moved like a ghost. Hours of training, of missions that never made the record books, taught me to blend into the dark, to make every shadow my ally. 2 hours later, I reached an overwatch point 800 meters from the fortress. From my vantage, the enemy installation sprawled like a nightmare. A central courtyard surrounded by reinforced barracks, guard towers on every corner, overlapping fields of fire. Technical trucks with mounted heavy weapons stood ready at key positions, capable of annihilating a conventional assault. These weren't amateurs. These were veterans who had tangled with American forces before and survived. I spent 30 minutes mapping patrol routes, scanning comm hubs, and identifying weak points. My heart didn't race. Excitement didn't distract me. I cataloged patterns, timing shifts, and structural vulnerabilities with clinical precision. Every detail mattered. A single miscalculation could turn this mission into a funeral. Phase 1 began with the generator, 200 meters downhill, guarded by a lone sentry. Approaching from the blind side, I slid across the rough terrain, silent as a shadow. When I struck, it was over before he knew I was there. Knife to neck. Silent. Efficient. I dragged him behind the generator casing, hidden from view, and set a small charge on the fuel line. When it detonated, the base would go dark. Lights, radios, security systems, all cut in an instant. I exhaled slowly. One phase down. Time for the next. Crouching against natural stone ridges hugging the compound's perimeter, I watched 2 guards on predictable patrols. The first passed. I closed in behind him, and a swift knife strike silenced him forever. The second turned at a faint sound, and my suppressed rifle finished the job. I was inside. Through a narrow slit, I spotted my team, SEALs bruised, bound, and beaten, watched by 4 armed militants. Relief surged briefly, but I suppressed it. This was no time for emotion. Extraction had to be surgical, perfect. I began planting charges at 3 critical points: the main tower, comm hub, and motor pool. When detonated simultaneously, confusion would be mine. 2,334 hours. The generator exploded, plunging the fortress into darkness. Emergency lights flickered uselessly. Moments later, my charges detonated in sequence. The tower collapsed. The comms post erupted. Motor pool ignited in fire. Chaos ruled, but I moved like a ghost. Enemies scrambled blindly while I moved with precision. Suppressed shots, explosive rounds, every movement calculated, every enemy neutralized. I reached the prison block, pinpointed the hostages, and prepared to breach. They had anticipated a frontal assault, but I had no intention of following their script. A controlled explosion tore a man-sized gap through the wall, and I entered. Rifle up, every movement deadly. In seconds, all enemy resistance was gone. Finally, Captain Renshaw muttered as I cut his restraints. Thought I'd die here, Sprocket. Had to find parking first, I quipped, slicing through the bonds. 6 hostages freed. 40 enemies neutralized. Not a single friendly casualty. The night had only just begun. 0012 hours. The extraction began. I led the SEALs along paths I had mapped during reconnaissance, weaving through the jagged terrain with the precision of someone who knew every rock, every shadow, every danger. The night was my ally. Fallen enemies marked our route, silent proof of my earlier work. At the outer gate, resistance hit. Surviving fighters had set up a machine gun nest, a deadly obstacle that could end the mission in seconds. I didn't hesitate. I lobbed a grenade with perfect timing, the explosion wiping out the crew. Then I laid down covering fire so my team could breach the gap I'd created. The terrain beyond the walls was no easier. The enemy had lost their vehicles thanks to my earlier sabotage, leaving them to pursue on foot. 2 kilometers of uneven, hostile ground separated us from safety. Every step demanded absolute focus. A single misstep could draw attention or worse. But I moved like I had a tether to the night itself. Every sense sharp, every movement calculated. By 1:47 hours, we reached my truck, hidden in a stand of low pines 2 kilometers north. The SEALs froze for a moment, staring at what looked like a normal repair vehicle, but I knew they were taking in the modifications. Reinforced armor, hidden compartments, comms gear, and weapons caches. What have you been doing these past 3 years? Captain Renshaw asked, all lacing his voice. Vehicle maintenance, I replied flatly, climbing into the driver's seat. The ride back was tense. The winding mountain roads demanded the full skill of a driver who had spent years learning to maneuver at the edge of physics. The SEALs stayed quiet, weapons ready, eyes scanning the dark horizon. The fortress behind us still burned, a fiery reminder of the lesson I had delivered. Some threats, once identified, couldn't be ignored. We arrived back at Forward Operating Base Stonewatch at 0230 hours. I drove straight to the medical wing, where the SEALs were rushed into treatment. Their injuries were minor, mostly bruises and exhaustion, but each one bore the marks of captivity, the subtle tremor of restrained muscles, the pallor of adrenaline finally spent. Captain Renshaw pulled me aside. I need to know what happened tonight. 1 operator, 6 hostages, 40 enemies down, 0 friendly casualties. How? I shrugged, wiping dirt and sweat from my face. Sometimes unusual problems demand unusual solutions. He studied me closely, recognition in his eyes. He had seen that look before, operators who had done things the world could never know, and survived. Understood, he said quietly. But, thank you, Sprocket. You saved us all tonight. I allowed myself the faintest flicker of pride. 40 enemies neutralized. 6 Americans alive. Mission accomplished. And officially, I had been on a routine parts run. 3 hours later, I was back in the garage. The wrenches, the oil, the grease, it all felt ordinary again. When the other mechanics asked about my all-night trip, I held up the transmission parts one had supposedly retrieved. No one pressed further. No one needed to know. At 0800, Major Hayes stopped by. Morgan, I heard SEAL Team Delta ran into some trouble last night. Their vehicles need complete inspections. Yes, sir. I replied, not looking up from the engine I was tightening. Good. And Morgan, thanks for keeping the fleet running. We'd be crippled without mechanics like you. Thank you, sir, I said, letting the brief praise settle without fanfare. The world outside had no idea what had transpired, and that was the way I liked it. Tomorrow, there would be engines to service, vehicles to repair, and my cover to maintain. The night's work had passed, but the war never truly ended. My encrypted wrist comm buzzed once more. Package delivered. Well done, Vance. I cleared the message and returned to my engine as if nothing had happened. Out here, invisibility wasn't just a strategy, it was survival. And the next time my country needed a ghost, I'd be ready. 3 weeks later, I was back in the garage, routine maintenance under my hands, when a black SUV with diplomatic plates rolled through the checkpoint. 2 men in plain clothes stepped out, their posture and precision immediately giving away intelligence training. Staff Sergeant Vance, the taller one said, voice calm but firm. We need to talk about your recent overtime. I set down my wrench, wiped my hands on a rag, and followed them to a secure briefing building usually reserved for classified meetings. Inside, I was met with a panel of officials whose clearances reached the deepest corners of U.S. intelligence. A woman in a tailored suit stepped forward. Sergeant Vance, your results during Operation Iron Watch have drawn attention at the highest levels. We have questions. I kept my expression neutral. Ma'am, I don't know what operation you mean. I've been on vehicle maintenance duty for 3 years. A familiar voice interrupted. We know exactly what went down, said Colonel Adrian Locke, my former Raven unit commander, stepping forward with a classified folder under his arm. He spread satellite images across the table, before and after shots of the fortress I had leveled. The destruction was absolute. Buildings reduced to rubble, vehicles gone, 40 hostiles confirmed dead by thermal scans. Single-operator infiltration and extraction. 6 Americans freed. 0 friendly losses. A combat effectiveness ratio that shattered every known model. The intelligence officer leaned in. Sergeant Vance, we're not here to jeopardize your cover. We're here because missions like this are becoming more common. Conventional forces aren't enough. She tapped a secure tablet, bringing up global incident reports, hostage standoffs in denied regions, recoveries in politically sensitive zones, precision strikes on high-value targets. The world is shifting, she continued. Colonel Locke added, conventional operations are constrained by politics, media scrutiny, and international law, while threats continue to adapt. We need operators like you in deep cover roles, mechanics, clerks, drivers, positions that let you vanish into the scenery but stay ready when conventional forces can't act. Another officer spoke up. This program doesn't exist on paper. No chain of command, no official records. If compromised, operators are completely deniable. I studied the proposal carefully. Essentially, it was the life I had already been living, only now with official recognition and resources that could make me even more effective. And my current post? I asked. You remain Staff Sergeant Vance, Motor Pool Supervisor, Locke explained. But your duties will include more than just vehicles. You'll maintain American interests in ways that don't appear in official records. The woman tapped her tablet, displaying a global map dotted with hotspots, contested regions, embassies in hostile capitals, areas rich in resources yet lawless. Think of it as preventive maintenance, she said. Fixing problems before they escalate into crises. I nodded slowly. The formal military was bound by rules, but I had always thrived in the gray spaces between policy and necessity. This was an expansion of my capabilities, a chance to operate unseen on a global scale. What's the tempo? I asked. Variable, she replied. Some stretches will pass without action. Other times, you'll be activated immediately for fast-moving situations. If a mission exceeds your solo capacity, that's when the network steps in, other operators embedded in cover roles, ready to act. I glanced around the room. These were some of the most powerful figures in U.S. intelligence, and they were offering something unprecedented: authority, tools, and freedom to act when the world's usual mechanisms failed. I accept, I said plainly. Locke closed the folder with finality. Welcome to the most important job you'll never talk about, Alara. America needs mechanics who can fix problems that don't officially exist. The meeting concluded with detailed instructions on comms protocols, resource access, and emergency triggers. I learned that my requisitions would soon include equipment far beyond trucks and engines, tools designed for missions requiring permanent solutions. 2 months later, orders arrived transferring me to a new assignment. Motor Pool Supervisor at Forward Operating Base Crestfall, near the volatile Draven Peninsula, a disputed zone claimed by 3 nations but effectively controlled by none. On paper, nothing had changed. I would still maintain vehicles, track inventory, and supervise mechanical repairs. In truth, my mission was far broader. I would serve as the unseen shield for U.S. operations in one of the planet's most dangerous regions. The world wouldn't notice what I did. That was the point. By my 3rd day at Forward Operating Base Crestfall, I had already mapped the entire motor pool, inventory systems, vehicle access routes, and surrounding terrain. It was routine work, at least on paper. Every wrench turn, every engine inspection, every parts requisition reinforced my cover. But I knew better. Every corner I studied could later be the difference between life and death. At 1,445 hours, my encrypted wrist comm buzzed with a new alert. Package malfunction. Immediate response required. Coordinates attached. Americans in jeopardy. Full authorization to use any means necessary. I exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar shift in my posture, the transformation from mechanic to operative. In under an hour, I would shed grease-stained coveralls and step into the role I had been preparing for my entire adult life. I pulled aside a workstation and retrieved my hidden arsenal. A suppressed M4 rifle, Glock 19 with extended magazines, tactical vest with ceramic plating, medical kit, explosives, and the black comm jammer. I double-checked everything. Muscle memory made it routine. Every weapon zeroed, every device operational. No room for error. The terrain of the Draven Peninsula was brutal. Jagged cliffs, shifting sands, and narrow valleys that could betray even the most careful movement. But I had already memorized escape routes, blind spots, and terrain advantages. I knew how to move unseen, how to merge with the shadows, how to let the land itself hide me. By 15:30 hours, I was in my modified transport vehicle, which looked like an ordinary supply truck but concealed armor, advanced comms, and hidden compartments for gear no mechanic, or any soldier, would expect to find. The disguise worked flawlessly. The checkpoint guards barely glanced at me as I drove past. Sprocket was just going for parts. Once clear of the base, I stopped behind a ridge, sliding into tactical gear with smooth efficiency. The transformation complete, I checked the map and coordinates. The Americans in jeopardy were held in a fortified compound 2 hours' drive into hostile territory, guarded by heavily armed mercenaries who had tangled with U.S. forces before. This wasn't a rookie mission. It was a test of every skill I had honed over 8 years. Infiltration, reconnaissance, close-quarters combat, explosives, and extraction under impossible conditions. And I would face it alone until backup, or the network, could be activated. I ran through the plan in my mind. Reconnaissance first, disabling external defenses second, infiltrating the compound third, extraction fourth, and escape fifth. Every step had contingencies. Every detail accounted for. My fingers traced the outline of the weapons in the truck, tools that could dismantle their defenses silently, surgically, without drawing attention. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, I began the drive toward the target. Every kilometer passed with calculated patience. Every glance at the rearview mirror ensured no unwanted attention followed. The night would be my ally. The shadows would conceal me. And when the time came, I would become something the enemy hadn't anticipated, a ghost in the machinery of war. By 1700 hours, I was within striking distance, and the first real test of tonight's mission loomed. The Americans' lives were in my hands. I whispered to myself, almost unconsciously, "Let's fix this." By 1830 hours, I had reached an overwatch point 900 meters from the compound. The place looked like an old industrial facility, retrofitted into a fortress. High walls reinforced with steel, guard towers on every corner, and vehicles mounted with heavy weaponry parked strategically to cover all approaches. These weren't amateurs. They were hardened mercenaries with experience fighting American forces. I crouched behind a rocky ridge, scanning their patrol routes through my night vision optics. I noted the rotation patterns, timing, and blind spots. Every step mattered. One mistake, one noise, one misjudged shadow, and the mission could fail before it even began. The first target was the generator, located downhill, guarded by a single sentry. Approaching from the blind side, I moved like a shadow, every footstep deliberate. My knife found its mark silently, swiftly. The body slid behind the generator, hidden from view, and I rigged a small charge on the fuel line. When triggered, it would plunge the facility into darkness, disabling lights, radios, and surveillance systems. Phase 1 complete. Next, I moved toward a section of the perimeter where 2 guards patrolled predictably. Timing my approach, I eliminated the first with a knife strike, so silent it might as well have been a shadow itself. The second guard turned at the faintest sound, and my suppressed rifle ended the threat before he could react. I had breached the outer defenses. The compound's internal layout was complex: barracks, a central courtyard, and a reinforced prison block where the hostages were held. 4 guards kept watch over them. I assessed my options. A frontal assault would be suicide. I needed another approach. I planted charges at 3 critical points: the main tower, the comm hub, and the vehicle depot. Synchronized detonation would create chaos, disorienting the enemy and giving me the upper hand. 2,330 hours. The generator exploded. Darkness swallowed the compound. Emergency lights flickered uselessly. Seconds later, my charges tore through the structures in sequence. The tower collapsed. The comms post ignited. The vehicle depot erupted in flames. Chaos erupted, but I moved like a phantom, unseen, untouchable. Through the night vision scope, I saw mercenaries scrambling blindly, shouting orders that no one could hear. They fired into shadows while I moved with precision, eliminating threats methodically. Explosive rounds tore through heavy weapon nests. Suppressed shots cut down sentries. Every movement was calculated, surgical. I reached the prison block. The hostages were battered but alive. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they realized a single operator had dismantled the compound's defenses. I slipped a key into my belt and began cutting their restraints. Captain Miles Callahan, their leader, lifted his head. Finally, he muttered, "I thought we were done for. Had to find parking first." I replied with a smirk, slicing the final bonds. 6 Americans freed. 40 enemies neutralized. Not a single casualty on our side. Mission Phase 1 complete. Extraction phase ready to begin. But the night was far from over. The outer defenses would reorganize, reinforcements might arrive, and the terrain itself was unforgiving. I glanced at the horizon, the faint glow of fires from the burning compound painting the valley in orange. "Time to go," I whispered. My team followed, weapons ready. As we melted into the shadows I had memorized, every step taking us closer to the hidden truck that awaited us 2 kilometers north. 0015 hours. The SEALs and I moved through the valley, shadows stretching long under the faint glow of distant fires. The compound behind us was chaos incarnate, but danger was far from over. Surviving mercenaries scrambled, calling reinforcements, and the terrain itself, steep ravines and loose scree, threatened to betray every step. I led the team with silent precision, guiding them along paths I had memorized during reconnaissance. Fallen enemies marked our route, silent proof of the strikes I had made inside the compound. Every step required vigilance. A misstep could alert the remaining forces or set off a chain of unforeseen hazards. At 0030 hours, we approached a ridge overlooking the primary access route the enemy might use to pursue us. From my vantage, I spotted 3 mercenaries patrolling the path below. A grenade lobbed with calculated arc cleared the ridge, silently removing the threat. I signaled the SEALs forward, covering their movement with bursts from my suppressed rifle. The 2-kilometer trek to the truck demanded absolute concentration. Loose rocks, sharp cliffs, and sudden drops meant a single mistake could be fatal. I guided the team through narrow passes, silent as the wind, every sense tuned to the environment and enemy activity. 0147 hours. The truck came into view, hidden behind low pines. The SEALs froze, awed at the sight of what appeared to be an ordinary supply vehicle, but my modifications were no secret to me. Reinforced armor, hidden weapon caches, encrypted comms, and compartments large enough to carry tactical gear for an entire squad. Captain Callahan stepped forward, awe evident in his eyes. This is your truck?" he asked. "Vehicle maintenance," I replied flatly, sliding into the driver's seat. The ride back was tense. Twisting mountain roads demanded all of my driving skill, the kind that only comes from years of operating under hostile conditions. The SEALs remained alert, scanning the dark terrain, weapons ready. The fires from the burning compound flickered behind us like ghostly warnings. By 0230 hours, we arrived at Forward Operating Base Crestfall. I drove straight to the medical wing, where the SEALs were rushed into treatment. Their wounds were minor, but their bodies carried the strain of captivity. Bruises, scrapes, exhaustion. It was all visible evidence of what they had endured. Captain Callahan pulled me aside. "Alara, 1 operator, 6 hostages, 40 enemies neutralized, 0 friendly casualties." "How?" I wiped sweat from my brow, keeping my voice calm. Sometimes unusual problems demand unusual solutions. He studied me, recognition in his eyes. He had seen this before in elite operators, the quiet, lethal ones who didn't appear in records. Understood, he said softly. But, thank you. You saved us all tonight. I nodded and returned to the garage. Engines to inspect, vehicles to maintain, my cover unbroken. The encrypted wrist comm buzzed once more. Package delivered. Well done, Vance. I cleared the message, slid the wrench into the tray, and returned to my work as if nothing had happened. Invisibility was survival. And when the next call came, I would answer again, silent, efficient, lethal. 3 days later, I was back at the motor pool, tightening a transmission when a black SUV with diplomatic plates rolled through the checkpoint. 2 men in plain clothes stepped out, their posture precise, their eyes sharp, professionals who didn't waste a single motion. Staff Sergeant Vance, the taller one said, voice calm but firm. We need to talk about your recent overtime. I set my wrench down, wiped my hands on a rag, and followed them to a secure briefing room, one usually reserved for high-level classified meetings. Inside, I faced a panel of officials whose clearances extended to the deepest corners of U.S. intelligence. A woman in an elegant suit spoke first. Sergeant Vance, your results during Operation Iron Watch have drawn attention at the highest levels. We have questions. Ma'am, I don't know what operation you mean, I said, keeping my voice steady. I've been on vehicle maintenance duty for 3 years. A familiar voice cut through. We know exactly what happened, said Colonel Adrian Locke, my former Raven unit commander, stepping forward with a classified folder. He spread satellite images across the table, before and after shots of the fortress I had leveled. Buildings reduced to rubble. 40 hostiles neutralized. 6 Americans freed. Not a single friendly casualty. The combat effectiveness ratio here breaks every model we have, an intelligence officer said. A single operator, infiltration, extraction, and neutralization on this scale, unprecedented. Locke continued. We're not here to jeopardize your cover, Alara. But operations like this are becoming more common. Conventional forces aren't enough. We need operators embedded in deep cover roles, mechanics, clerks, drivers, positions that let you vanish into the background while remaining ready to act when necessary. Another officer added, this program exists only off the books. No chain of command, no official records. If compromised, operators are deniable. I studied the proposal. Essentially, it formalized the life I had already been living, with resources and authority to make me far more effective. And my current post? I asked. You remain Staff Sergeant Vance, motor pool supervisor, Locke explained. But your duties will now include maintaining American interests in ways that don't appear in official records. The woman tapped her tablet, displaying a global map of hotspots, embassies in hostile regions, contested territories, and high-risk operational zones. Think of it as preventive maintenance, she said. Fixing problems before they escalate into crises. I nodded. The official military was constrained by rules, treaties, and politics, but I had always thrived in the shadows, in the gray spaces between policy and necessity. This was the next level. What's the tempo? I asked. Variable, she replied. Some periods may pass without action. Others will require immediate deployment. If a mission exceeds your solo capacity, the network will step in. Operators embedded worldwide, ready to act. I glanced around the room. These were some of the most powerful figures in intelligence, offering unprecedented autonomy, authority, and resources. I accept, I said plainly. Locke closed the folder. Welcome to the most important job you'll never talk about, Alara. America needs mechanics who can fix problems that don't officially exist. The meeting concluded with instructions on comms, resource access, and emergency triggers. My requisitions would soon include gear far beyond vehicles, equipment designed for operations that demanded permanent solutions. 2 months later, I was assigned to Forward Operating Base Crestfall on the volatile Draven Peninsula, a place claimed by 3 nations, effectively controlled by none, and crawling with militants, arms traffickers, and hostile intelligence operatives. On paper, nothing changed. I was still a mechanic, still a supervisor. But in reality, my mission had expanded to a global scale. I was the unseen shield, the ghost keeping American interests intact. And tonight, my first activation from Crestfall would prove exactly that. It was 1,700 hours when my encrypted wrist comm buzzed. Immediate response required. Americans in jeopardy. Coordinates attached. Full authorization granted. I exhaled, feeling the familiar tension rise in my shoulders, the shift from mechanic to operative. In under an hour, grease-stained coveralls would be replaced with tactical gear, and a routine day in the motor pool would turn into a high-stakes operation. I checked my arsenal: suppressed M4, Glock 19 with extended magazines, tactical vest with ceramic plating, medical kit, explosives, and the Blackcom jammer. Every piece was accounted for, every weapon zeroed. Muscle memory made the checklist second nature. The Draven Peninsula was unforgiving: jagged cliffs, narrow valleys, and shifting terrain that could betray even the most cautious operator. I had already mapped escape routes, blind spots, and vantage points. Every rock, shadow, and drop was part of the plan. By 1800 hours, I was in my modified supply truck, the ultimate camouflage. Guards waved me past at the checkpoint without a second glance. Sprocket was just going for parts. Out of sight of the base, I pulled over behind a ridge, swapped coveralls for combat attire, and prepared my gear. The transformation was complete. Reconnaissance was first. The target compound appeared like an industrial facility, retrofitted into a fortress. High walls, guard towers, and heavy gun vehicles covered every approach. Experienced mercenaries patrolled in predictable rotations, but I had studied them through my scope, noting timing and blind spots. Phase 1 was the generator, downhill, guarded by a lone sentry. I moved like a shadow, every footstep deliberate. A knife strike was silent, swift. The body disappeared behind the generator, and I rigged a small charge on the fuel line. Darkness would be my ally. Next, 2 perimeter guards. Timing my approach, I eliminated the first silently. The second fell to a suppressed round before he could react. The outer defenses were neutralized, giving me entry into the compound. Charges were planted at 3 critical points: the main tower, the comm hub, and the vehicle depot. Synchronized detonation would create chaos, disorienting the enemy and giving me the advantage. 2,330 hours. The generator went down. Darkness swallowed the compound. Emergency lights flickered uselessly. My charges tore through structures in sequence. The tower collapsed. The comms post ignited, and the vehicle depot erupted. Chaos erupted, but I moved like a phantom. Through night vision optics, I watched mercenaries scramble blindly. I eliminated threats methodically, each shot precise, each movement calculated. Explosive rounds tore through heavy weapons, suppressors silenced sentries, and I advanced to the prison block. The hostages were battered but alive. Captain Callahan, their leader, lifted his head. Finally, I thought we were done for. Had to find parking. I quipped, slicing restraints loose. 6 Americans freed. 40 enemies neutralized. No friendly casualties. Phase 1 complete. Extraction awaited. I whispered to myself, let's go home, leading the team through mapped escape routes, every step measured, every shadow a shield. 0015 hours. We moved through the valley, shadows long under the faint glow of fires from the burning compound behind us. The surviving mercenaries scrambled, but the terrain was unforgiving, and I guided the team with every ounce of precision I had. Loose rocks, jagged cliffs, and sudden drops demanded full attention. One mistake could undo everything. We reached the hidden truck 2 kilometers north. The SEALs froze in awe at what appeared to be an ordinary supply vehicle, but every modification was designed for missions like this: reinforced armor, hidden weapons caches, encrypted comms, and compartments for tactical gear. Captain Callahan asked, incredulous, "This is your truck?" "Vehicle maintenance," I said flatly, sliding behind the wheel. The ride back to forward operating base Crestfall was tense. Twisting mountain roads demanded skill honed over years of operating in hostile zones. The SEALs remained alert, scanning the dark terrain. The fires from the compound flickered behind us like ghostly warnings of what had been left behind. By 0230 hours, we reached the base. I drove straight to the medical wing where medics rushed to treat the SEALs. Their injuries were minor, but every muscle carried the tension of captivity. Captain Callahan pulled me aside. 1 operator. 6 hostages. 40 enemies neutralized. 0 friendly casualties. How? I wiped sweat from my brow and kept my voice calm. Sometimes unusual problems demand unusual solutions. He studied me closely. Recognition shone in his eyes. He had seen that look in elite operators. The quiet, lethal ones who didn't appear on records. Understood. But thank you, Alara. You saved us all tonight. 3 hours later, I returned to the motor pool. Engines to inspect, vehicles to maintain. Wrenches in hand, grease under my nails, my cover intact. My encrypted wrist comm buzzed. Package delivered. Well done, Vance. I cleared the message and returned to the engine I had been working on, the sounds of the motor pool filling the space around me. Tomorrow would bring more vehicles, more routine tasks, more invisibility. And someday soon, another call would come. Another impossible problem, another mission that required someone unseen. I reflected on how far my path had carried me. From Raven unit operator to hidden mechanic, to a ghost in the machine maintaining American interests silently, efficiently, and lethally. Out here, invisibility wasn't just strategy, it was survival. And some threats could only be neutralized by someone who worked quietly, thinking differently, acting decisively, and never leaving a trace. The world wouldn't notice the lives I had saved tonight. That was the point. 40 enemies dead, 6 Americans alive, a fortress dismantled by one operative in the shadows. And on paper, I was still just Staff Sergeant Alara Vance, motor pool supervisor, maintaining vehicles, tracking inventory, and turning wrenches. But I knew the truth. Some mechanics weren't just repairers. We were eliminators. Ghosts. Fixers of problems the world would never acknowledge. And I was very, very good at my job. The next mission would come. I would answer. And when it did, the enemy would learn, once again, that some threats were invisible until it was too late. Grease-stained hands returned to the engine, the hum of machinery surrounding me like a lullaby. The work never ended. Neither did I. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.